When you're looking for Whirlpool innovation and quality, who has the answers, the selection, the price? Ventura TV Appliance. With billions in nationwide appliance buying power, more than Home Depot and Best Buy combined, we'll help you save. Our low prices on Energy Star qualified Whirlpool appliances save you energy and money and pay no interest on select models when paid in full within 12 months. Ventura TV Appliance, serving you since 1951.
Hi, I'm John Malos. Welcome to this edition of Connect with Me on the showroom floor at Ventura TV on this day. You're watching us on Comcast Channel 187 and 43.6. Today we're going to talk about what effect the drought is having on the fishing industry. We have an expert in the house. He writes for the Fresno Bee, and you may or may not have seen his column. 436 MeTV option 11. Do call in. We're back in just a moment. Today is the world of sports, and we're talking about water, and you're kind of confused by that because we're talking about water and then it's the world of sports. We'll explain that in just a moment. But when you have water, or don't have water, I should say, you don't have life, and it's having a major effect on the fishing industry. There's no doubt about it. Our guest today, his first love is fishing. Well, I guess you could say, wait a minute, his first love would be his wife Elaine, his son David, but you'd be hard-pressed to find anyone who loves fishing more, has more knowledge than him about the industry and water than this guy in the studio today here in the Central Valley. Let's roll the videotape and I'll show you who I am talking about. Talking about this man, Roger George, and here he is at Millerton Lake a few years back doing what he does best, catching fish. He had quite a day on this day, catching a 20-pound striper and later on reeling in the big one, a record 50-pounder. Wow, 50 pounds. My gosh. This guy knows so much about fishing. He actually hosted his own 1-hour live program on ESPN radio right here in Fresno, 2004 and 2005. A year later, he joined the Fresno Bee as a weekly fishing columnist. It's now a staple in the sports section in the Bee. Hey, that's not all. Did you know that Roger George used to be a world-class athlete? Yes, my friends, he was a 3-time All-American track star, and in 1976 he became an alternate to the U.S. Olympic decathlon team. That's the same year that Bruce Jenner won the gold medal in the decathlon, 1976 in Montreal. George loves the outdoors. He goes fishing at least twice a week. Where does he find the time? How does he do that? So relaxed on the boat at Millerton, calmly reels in the big one. Live in our studio right now is Roger George, the fisherman. He has a column in the Fresno Bee once a week. It's every Wednesday in the sports section. You may have seen it. It's become a staple. As I said in the beginning, you'd be hard-pressed to find someone who knows more about fishing than Roger George, our guest today. A special program here on Connect with Me, Comcast Channel 187, 43.6. We'll be back with our first-time guest of Roger George in just a moment.
Frigidaire. We introduced the first home freezer, the first pulsator agitator washer, and now we introduce the Frigidaire Orbit Clean dishwasher, designed with a unique wash arm that gives you 4 times more water coverage for a consistently better clean. Frigidaire, over 90 years of legendary innovation.
See the full line of Frigidaire appliances at Ventura TV Electronics and Appliances.
There's no doubt if you don't have water, it has an effect on everything, our everyday living, and even some of the things that we enjoy. And a lot of people go out fishing in the Central Valley during the summertime. And the Fresno Bee is right here, the sports section. Roger George, our guest, has a very nice article here, June 11, 2014, about what effect the drought is having on the fishing industry. Roger, welcome to the program.
Thank you very much, John. Thanks for having me.
Yeah, so your article today in the Bee kind of outlines the whole thing. You know, ponds are drying up. And ponds are drying up. And you've seen the pictures at Millerton. What, 30-40% capacity?
Yeah.
I mean, it's really how big a deal is this, and how much of an effect is it having on the fishing industry?
Well, I don't think we can overstate it. I don't think we've ever been here before. This is a drought situation that's more extreme than anything we've had since 1977. So the outcome of this is still up for conjecture, but I think that what we're going to see is we're going to see things we haven't seen before, particularly if we have some heat waves later in the summer. We could have fish die-offs. We could have some things that are not going to be good for fishermen and anglers and water sports enthusiasts this year.
Is it difficult to pinpoint how many ponds we have in this area and how many of them are drying up at this point? By the end of the summer, a lot of them could be just gone.
There are already quite a few that have already gone. They had, for the last couple of years, we've actually had, this is the third year of really the drought. Most of those are spring-fed waters that are going into those ponds, and so that has dried up the last couple of years. So, John, what's going on is that those ponds have gotten lower and lower, and this year there's really nothing to back it up. So they're just about down to the very bottom. Very few have enough to make it through this summer. So we're seeing them already go dry. We're seeing a lot of them that are coming close to it right now.
Behind us, we're rolling the video. Maybe we can just roll it full screen of Millerton Lake. Usually that big mound right there is completely covered in water. You can't even see it. Look at that, Roger. Isn't that tragic right there? Is it having a big effect on Millerton as well? Because I know a lot of people, such as yourself, they go fishing at Millerton.
Millerton is actually my home water. That's where I hold the record. So I fish up there an awful lot. And right now, actually, what's interesting is that Millerton's actually one of the lakes that has the highest capacity going right now. So it's actually somewhere around a little over 50%. So it's actually
Well, it must have gone up, because just recently, when we've talked about the drought many times on this program with Manuel Cunha and others, even politicians, it was only 40% capacity, somewhere in that range. So it's gone up?
It has actually gone up. They actually brought water in. I was shocked. They're managing the water this year differently than what they ever have in the past. And right now it got up to 50%, and then what they started doing is sipping a little bit out, and right now the inflow and the outflow are almost exactly the same as of yesterday.
They're probably monitoring the inflow and outflow by the minute, I would assume, because of the delicate situation.
That is exactly right.
Yeah.
And so they're handling this different and managing the water differently than I've ever seen, and yes, we are far below what we normally are this time of the year.
So what kind of an effect does it have on fishing in the industry?
Well, the effect it's having across the board is that the fishing has been definitely affected. Early in the season, when the temperatures were lower, the reservoirs weren't warmed up too quickly, even though they were lower, so the fishing was pretty good. But for the last 2 weeks, 3 weeks, as things have heated up, it's become more difficult. And so the fishing right now, we think it's going to be impacted pretty severely as the summer goes on. And the water temperatures are fairly high right now, to say the least.
What is it at Millerton? What would your guess be as to what the temperature is?
The other day when I was up there, I saw water that was 75 degrees on the very top, which may be only the top foot.
That's pretty warm.
That's very warm, and it can change very quickly. And I wasn't up there after we had a 110-degree day, so it could be up to, on the very top, it could be up close to 80 degrees in some places.
Yeah, is that unusual?
That's pretty doggone high, but with the water being down, if the water was up, that wouldn't be a problem. But when the water is down, obviously you're warming up a greater amount of that water. And
so when you have less water, the temperature, obviously, it stands to reason, is going to go up because it's closer to the ground. Is that it?
Exactly. You have a shallower amount of water, and that the deeper water isn't able to moderate the heat that's on the top. So, because a lot of times you have stirring effect that takes place with water on the top and on the bottom.
Yeah, I want to read something, just a portion of what you wrote in the Fresno Bee. You say, I hate to say it, but it's possible that things could get ugly for the next couple of years unless we get a deluge next season. What do you mean by that?
Well, at the end of this year, we could have a situation where there might be fish die-offs later this year. If they draw these reservoirs down to a very low level and we have a lot of heat, what we're going to see is the water temperatures will be so high and the oxygen content will be so low that these fish won't be able to survive, and so we could see thousands upon thousands of fish die in these lakes or reservoirs, depending on how these things play out.
So you're saying that the damage, you say this in the article, the damage could dog us for many years to come. What are you talking about in terms of time frame?
Well, it takes a lot of years for a fish to get to a point where we have big fish and we have trophy fish, the kind of fish that people
like a 50-pound striper. How long does that take?
That fish is 25 years old. And so when you change that situation, what you run into is you're going to have a problem.
That's your 50-pounder right there, right?
Yes, it is.
And when was that taken?
I caught that in 1998.
Okay, all right. And biggest one you've ever caught? It's a record, isn't it?
Yes, that was a record up there. And
so that fish that you caught right there is 25 years old?
Yes, they did the studies on it, and the biologist studied the scales just like the rings of a tree, and they could tell us exactly.
All right, and you also say in your article here, and I want to point this out, am I advocating fish over consumers, farmers, or any other group? No, but I am advocating using common sense to try to preserve the valuable recreational and economic resource.
Yeah, actually I was kind of surprised the editor let me put that in there.
Why is that?
Well, I think
because it's a controversial issue.
I think that once again, this is a valuable resource that a lot of industry depends upon. All the different industries that from top to bottom.
What kind of industries are going to be affected by this, would you say?
Well, you see a lot of marinas already that are closing, all the way down from Nacimiento all the way up to this area. There are some marinas that are so affected that they've closed. They've been around for decades. You see people that do boat repair that are telling me that a lot of people are concerned about the season, so what they're doing is they're not repairing their boats. So a lot of the places that depend upon servicing boat, and then boat sales are affected. Look at tackle shops. If you believe the fishing is going to go down, those are going to be affected dramatically too. So it just
tackle shops, the boat industry. What else? What other
marinas?
Marinas.
Yes. Anything like bait shops, small mom and pop type things, small communities like a small community of Shaver, for example. Now Shaver has done very well.
Shaver's going to be affected, right? It already is.
It will be affected, but it's actually weathering the storm better than anybody else at this point. But there are other towns and small communities that are dependent upon recreational opportunities and fishing.
And I saw something just recently here, as this morning on CBS, they were talking about Catalina Island and what effect the drought is having there.
Yes.
And they're having to they may have to ration water.
Well, I think that that only makes sense. And part of that article, when I wrote about what I thought people should be doing, I haven't seen a whole lot of change in the management and the conservation of water in this area. It hasn't become a top priority, which I believe it should have been quite some time ago.
And the reason for that would be it's a political issue?
Well, no, I believe that the water conservation across the board, I believe that at this point there hasn't been any real changes in the regulations and the rules, like for the city or outside the city as far as water use. I believe that there's a lot more water out there that could have been conserved over this period of time, and we wouldn't really have this if we did some more conservation.
Okay, talking to Roger George. He writes for the Fresno Bee. He's a former world-class athlete. Yes, I know. You are thinking, what? Yeah, he was. He was a track star, an All-American, three-time All-American. Back with our show and our guest in just a moment.
Frigidaire. We introduced the first home freezer, the first pulsator agitator washer, and now we introduce the Frigidaire Orbit Clean dishwasher, designed with a unique wash arm that gives you 4 times more water coverage for a consistently better clean. Frigidaire, over 90 years of legendary innovation.
See the full line of Frigidaire appliances at Ventura TV Electronics and Appliances.
Back here in the world of sports, you're probably wondering, why are we talking about sports? Well, we're talking about fishing. Fishing is a sport, right, Roger?
I believe so.
Yeah, it always has been.
A lot of the professional guys that are in sports, basketball, football golfers, they're all wannabe fishermen.
All right, I want to take you back in time to the 1970s. Gosh, I wish it was the 1970s already. Bruce Jenner, let's roll that videotape, because I went to YouTube and I pulled some. You know, all you young whippersnappers out there that don't know who Bruce Jenner is, you just see him with the Kardashians. Hey, this is 1976 Olympic Stadium in Montreal, and Bruce Jenner won the decathlon, and you were an alternate on that team.
Yes, I was.
Talk about Jenner.
You know, Bruce and I spent a lot of time together. When you're in decathlons, you're spending 2 days together, and Bruce and I were on a lot of teams together against the Russians and international teams. So over the course of years, we went to Olympic training camps together. Bruce was in San Jose, I was in Fresno. So we actually were good friends, and back then he wasn't the famous Wheaties star at that point.
That's not Bruce Jenner, though, by the way. That's obviously not him, and I don't know what video this is, but did you pull the right video, by the way? Okay, all right. That's not Jenner. I have no idea what this is. Let's get out of this.
That's actually Nikolay Avilov.
Okay.
He was the 1972 Olympic gold medalist, and I actually competed against him also.
Yeah, now this could be Jenner here on the right-hand side coming right at you. Is that him?
That is Bruce Jenner on the right-hand side right there.
992.
Yep.
Yeah,
that's
there
him.
he is, winning the decathlon in 1976. And so you see him occasionally, don't you?
Yeah, I saw him at the last Olympic trials, and we ran into each other, and actually all the people from that Olympic team, decathlon team.
There's Jenner. No, don't get out of the video. You're looking at Bruce Jenner right there. That's Jenner right there.
Yes.
Okay, and competing on the U.S. team. That's it?
Yep.
Okay. Anyway, most of that video was not Bruce Jenner, but toward the end it was.
Well, it was a good part of it there. The main parts there, that was definitely Bruce, but Nikolay Avilov was a great athlete.
Talk about your athletic prowess at one point there in the 70s, and your athletic ability in track and field.
Well, you know, I had Dutch Warmerdam as my coach at Fresno State, and he got me going on decathlon, and I found that I was very good at it, and I could do a lot of things pretty well, nothing fantastic. And
well,
so,
fantastic enough for you get on as an alternate on the team.
Well, you know, I was very good at decathlon, and that's what I found I was really good at. So, you know, and at Fresno State, I was NC2A runner-up 2 years in a row, Division I. So I just missed the national championships, and then in '76. I missed the Olympic team by just a matter of just a second and a half. It was a very, very close finish.
How did you get involved with fishing? How did you go from being a U.S. Olympian on alternate to fishing? How did that happen?
Well,
Tell me about that transition.
Yeah, that's a great question. I grew up on a farm on the west side of the valley, you know, kind of a Bob Mathias kind of story out in the middle of nowhere, out in Burrell, California out there, and I just, we were on a turkey ranch, and I chased turkeys. I had to catch them because that was the way that the ranch worked. And so I was a pretty good runner and jump over the fences. And it was one of those things where it developed. I could do a lot of things well. I went to a small school out there, and so I did a lot of things. And when I went to Fresno State, I was taught how to do different things, do all the different 10 events. And I began to realize that I could do well. And I had some great coaching, a great program, and over the course of about 7-8 years, I just kept developing those skills.
Yeah, amazing story. And so running after turkeys really kind of taught you how to run, and that's what you did, basically.
That's what I did. For 14 years I trained before I retired.
Yeah, and so you got into the fishing aspect of it. I want to put up a piece of video, roll it, Temperance Flat. We've talked about this many times on the show, so I know we're kind of bouncing back and forth here from Bruce Jenner to Temperance Flat. But, you know, building a dam out there, would it do any good? Would it help?
You know, I guess you're going to ask me a political question here.
I know. I wasn't planning on it, but
that's okay. I'll be glad to give you my political answer. At this point, you know, I think that once again, the cow's already out of the barn, and where to put it now?
Would it help? I mean, would we spend billions of dollars building this dam, and then we'd still have the same problem because we'd want to let some of that water out to help the fish, and we do need the fish, but there's got to be some kind of a balance. And I know you're not a politician, you're a fisherman, but
I'm not, from what I can see as far as the numbers, it looks to me like it's a very expensive project, and yet they're saying only 1 out of 3 years that they would really have water holding behind that dam.
We could sure use it this year, I'll tell you that.
We could use something like that this year, but looking at all the other alternatives as far as raising dams and some of the other things, it looks to me like those would be quicker projects and more effective per acre foot of water than what the Temperance Flat would be. That's just what I have seen.
See, here's the thing. Here's the reason I'm asking you as opposed to because I'm going to get a political answer from a politician. But you, the normal guy like you and me, okay, like me, there has to be a balance between satisfying fish and humans, right?
Right.
There's a balance in the system.
Yep.
Would you agree?
I think that that's exactly right, and I think that that us storing water is a very immediate problem, and the dam situation, I think, and once again, we're looking at spending billions of dollars, and when I look at it, the numbers for me, at least for Temperance, when they're saying only 1 out of 3 years, and when I look at the capacity of the second dam, being whatever they're projecting, 200,000 acre feet.
Yeah.
That's not a huge amount of water in the scheme of things here. Our needs are much greater than that. That's just been my take on what I have read so far. And once again, so much information is flowing out that it's difficult to manage all of it.
Yeah, it really is. Roger George is our guest today. We're happy to have him here, and I sure hope he comes back. He could be a regular on our show, talking about fishing and all sorts of other things. Back here in the world of sports on Connect with Me in a moment.
When you like Ventura TV Appliance on Facebook, it's nice. But when you love the Samsung big screen we deliver, it's even better. Our website is cool, and it's a good place to start. But you really should touch the merchandise before you buy. Time for that upgrade to an HD 3D web-enabled Samsung TV. Get the best selection, price, and service in town without waiting. Come in to Ventura TV Appliance and touch the merchandise today.
All right, back here with our guest, Roger George of the Fresno Bee. He writes a column, of course, every week, Wednesday, on fishing. He's very credible and has the ears and the eyes of all those that are in the industry because he does have that credibility. That's why he is here. You know, right now I want to put up a map because we're going to talk about Huntington Lake and some of the devastating effects of the drought. It's about 70 miles east of Fresno, 7,400 feet in elevation, right in the heart of the Sierra National Forest. I'll tell you what, the lake level is way down. Let's roll a videotape and I'll show you exactly what I'm talking about. Last year, the Aspen fire kept crowds away. This year, the lack of rain is doing it. The water level fell to 30% below capacity. Thus, for the first time in 60 years, the High Sierra Regatta has now been canceled. Of course, local businesses took a major hit. They rely on the regattas and the marina use as a source of revenue. So the folks up there really reeling. They had to get creative by coming up with other events such as the Sandcastle Contest, the 30-foot kite exhibitions, the fishing derbies coming up here in late summer. Huntington Lake has been around for about 100 years, dates back to, 1914, Roger? Look at that devastation there at Huntington Lake, 30% capacity. That is sad when you look at that video there.
Well, John, you said just a second ago that they had sandcastle competition, get creative. I think that's what the drought's going to cause us to do, is we're going to have to get creative. And, the fishing up there is still doing okay. We're still early in the season. It's cool up there, so the lower elevation lakes are being more affected by the heat than what the higher elevation lakes do. So right now, that's one of the positives out of the whole thing. But, you can't get a boat in. You can't launch. You're going to have to drag a boat into that lake in order to be able to fish. So it's a difficult situation. Normal recreational opportunities are very limited.
Look at this. This normally right here looks like the beachfront property there, but it really is the lake bottom. That normally is covered with water, Roger.
Well, I think that, I think they were looking for one of those airplanes, those B-52s or whatever, in the bottom of the lake at one point. Yeah. You've got the problem with boulders and all that. And a lot of the lakes around here have the same exact problem, and a lot of people are not thinking about the fact that their reservoirs are a lot lower and they're out boating, and a lot of guys are hitting rocks and tearing their lower units off and causing problems. And I expect by the end of the summer we're going to have some fatalities possibly from boating accidents that are out in main channels, actually.
Gosh, I hope not. We have another piece of videotape I want to roll from Huntington Lake. It's called Boat Launch, and you talked about these boats not being able to launch. If you can drag your boat in the water, I guess that's what these people are trying to do here. Some of them, you see a boat on the left-hand side of your screen right there. But, so, you know, when you have the water this low, Roger, some of the dangers are...
You're going to have all the obstacles that are not normally or just below the surface of the water. You're going to have all kinds of different areas where you have sandbars where people just are not thinking, and a lot of people don't watch their depth finders. So what happens is that they're thinking they're okay out in the middle, which is a common assumption. And being in the middle of a lake doesn't necessarily mean that you're not on the top of a pillar out in the middle of a lake that comes up within 2 inches of the surface.
Doesn't mean you're safe, huh?
It doesn't mean you're safe, and a lot of people out there, I've watched people go 40 miles an hour already this year, missing towers by just literally a matter of feet. There's been some lucky people.
Maureen Burrill was here from Huntington Lake last week talking about the dry beach. We're going to put that video up on the screen right now and roll that piece of videotape. And the fact of the matter is, if you look at the tree line there, that's usually where the water line is, okay?
Yep, that's usually where we're at.
And she was saying that that's where the water usually goes up. And now look at this. This is lake bottom. And if you're in a boat right here, Roger, on the lake, what should the maximum speed be?
5 miles an hour.
You serious?
Yeah, that should be the maximum that you do when it's that low. You know, and they don't mark the hazards out there. They're not marking them that I'm aware of. And a lot of the lakes, they don't mark them. So 5 miles an hour, if you hit something, you're not going to do terrible damage. But people sometimes put these high-powered boats in, and they just go for it, and they just ignore it being so low.
Could you be thrown out of the boat if you're going too fast and you hit a rock or some kind of debris?
Absolutely. You know, if you're going fast and your lower unit hits it, whether you have an outboard or whether you have an inboard outboard type of system, it could tear off your lower unit of your engine, and at the same time your boat will go flying in the air, and anybody in the boat can be thrown out. And that's why it's also important why on low-level lakes that you don't have people riding in the bow rider position up in the front of these boats, because if they get thrown out, they could literally be run over by propeller, because they'll get thrown out in front of the boat and they can get run over. And this has happened in the past, but now we're particularly at risk with these situations.
So you're serious. I mean, when you're sitting here talking about a boater going 5 miles an hour, you're not joking.
No,
you're serious about that, because normal speed would be what?
Normal speed might be 40 miles an hour.
Okay.
They might be able to do that, but
that would be topping out, though, right?
That would be topping out, and some people with high-powered boats might go faster than that in a lake that's full. But in these lower lakes, a lot of the lakes right now actually have instituted new areas of the lake that they've never done it before, where they're instituting 5 mile an hour zones for several reasons. One is they want to keep the waves down. And then number two is to also protect people from submerged obstacles that might be life-threatening if somebody is thrown out of the boat.
Obviously, when you have the lower water level, and Huntington Lake is not really built for water skiing, but in other lakes around the Central Valley, when the water levels are that low, water skiing recommended or not?
No, you know, once again, what people do is they just don't pay attention. And
they don't use common sense.
That's unfortunately, and Millerton is a good example where familiarity breeds contempt. You'll run into people that have been there many, many times, and they don't really pay attention to the fact that the water's 20 feet lower or more than what they're used to, and so they're just assuming that in that area that they're safe. And I had a guy the other day right in front of me that I was trying to wave back up at the upper end of Millerton that actually hit a rock and bounced out of the water about 2 feet with a 19-foot boat, and didn't do any damage because he was only going 5 miles an hour, but he was fortunate.
Yeah, let me roll another piece of videotape, the dry pier up at Huntington Lake, and we're kind of focusing on Huntington here because we did a show last week on it, and the devastation is just, you know, I don't know, you look at this piece of videotape and you say, you know, why is this lake so dry? It doesn't have to be that way, but if you're in a boat, I don't care if you're going 5 miles an hour, Roger, I don't care if you're going 40, should you always be wearing that life vest?
I would certainly, in these low water conditions, I think people need to be more aware of that than ever, because being thrown out of a boat is a very real scenario. And most people at the lake, if you go up to Millerton or if you go to Pine Flat or any lake that does have a little bit of water, you'll find that 95% of the people are not wearing life preservers, and particularly kids. And a lot of times they're breaking the law because the really young kids are supposed to be wearing life preservers. It's, once again, familiarity breeds contempt, and you think you're safe. Things on the water happen very quickly, especially if you have speed involved and water. Things happen so quickly, somebody gets hurt, they're going down. And I've seen accidents before like that.
As I'm looking at this piece of videotape, I'm thinking to anyone thinking or having any bright ideas of jumping off the rocks into the water, you better make sure that water is deep enough or you're going to be in trouble.
I saw people the other day that were jumping off the rocks at Millerton, and frankly, a lot of people, there's been injuries up there, and actually they've tried to prohibit it, where kids are jumping off of rocks, guys jumping off of rocks, and there's been some people that were paralyzed and some famous situations that occurred, and now the water's lower, so it would be just that much worse. And once again, a lot of people, when they get a little bit, they have a little too much to drink at a lake, they start doing things they shouldn't do, and that's also part of this formula.
Yeah, that's part of the problem. And the water should be how deep if you want to dive safely?
If you're going to jump off of a rock that's 25 feet high, I would want to have 20 foot of water underneath me.
At least,
For me, I would think that would be safe, because if you hit something, you're going to have a real problem. So, another aspect of this is that on a lake like this in Huntington, or whether we're Pine Flat or Millerton, any of them, is that right now we also have a lot less surface area. Obviously, we have a very small body of water, but we have in all these lakes a very small surface area compared to normal. It may be 1/3 or less, and people are still out there running around at high speed, and they're running around in a situation where boats are much more compacted into a small area, and a lot of people just don't know the rules of the water and what they should do. And so a lot of people just frankly are water skiing, going too fast, not paying attention to the rules, and it just causes that's another part of this formula that creates a problem.
All right, not paying attention, not knowing the rules. If you add to that drinking and mischief behavior, you're going to, the high probability of something happening certainly increases. We're talking with Roger George. He's from the Fresno Bee, writes a column once a week, a fishing column on Wednesdays. It's a great column. Check it out. We're going to continue our conversation and ask him if some of these low-lying areas where the lake levels are so low, what about the fishing conditions? Are there still plenty of fish in that water? We're back with our program here on Comcast 187 43.6 in a moment.
Ventura TV Appliance Center. We're the save energy, save time, save money place. The Energy Star qualified, ready steam equipped, high efficiency Frigidaire affinity place. You heard right. Right now, save big on select Frigidaire laundry pairs and pay no interest when paid in full within 6 months. At the hometown low price, think outside the big box place. Since 1951, Ventura TV Appliance Center. We're working hard to be your place.
We're here with Roger George of the Fresno Bee, but he doesn't, he's not just a columnist for the Fresno Bee, writing about fishing each and every week on Wednesdays. But this guy, at one time, I know you might find this hard to believe, but he's a world-class athlete. Competed in the decathlon in 1976 alongside Bruce Jenner. The 76 Olympic Games, of course, taking place in Montreal, and Bruce Jenner won the decathlon, the gold medal there in that event that year. We're going to talk about that later in the program. We touched on it before just for a few minutes. We'll get to it later here before the program ends. But back to the drought. What is the biggest, in your opinion, of people who go out on the lakes around the valley that want to boat, that want to fish? What's the biggest misconception that they have?
I think that for a lot of people, when you say misconception, I think that, the summertime right now, we've got really hot water. The water temperatures are reaching, in some cases, 85 degrees in the lower lakes down here. Mm-hmm. So right now, if you're talking about misconception, if a lot of people are still fishing down here in water that's getting to be extremely warm in smaller water, what happens is that the fishing actually changes from lower valley up to the higher altitudes, and the reason why is because it's cooler up there. So the fishing has been better. So Shaver, Wishon, Cartwright, Edison, Florence, all
Huntington.
Huntington. All those lakes have actually become the prime movers for fishermen at this point. And the water's just cooler, so that
How much
protects them.
colder are the lakes up there, like Florence and Huntington Lake? How much colder are they than, say, Millerton?
Well, you're looking at surface water that can be up to 85 degrees at Millerton. You're looking at water up there that probably, I would have to guess, is right around 62, 63. So it's a huge differential. And the way that fish operate in water, and the way that water and fish, the biology of it, there's a real impact on fish and the way that they react in water. And that's something that maybe I can explain in just a second, too.
Yeah, I want to talk about that, but I want to talk about the coldness of the water, especially in Huntington, because we do have video of that. Let's take a roll of the videotape. We got some more video to show, maybe the tree stumps. But one of the reasons the water is colder too is because that's snow melt that's coming down.
Right, and and as we get to the very end of that, your water temperatures go from maybe the high mid 40s, and then they start to come up. And obviously our snow melt this year we had very little, so we actually had the temperatures in the water were actually higher sooner than what we normally would have because of the lack of snow melt.
Look at some of the tree stumps that normally are covered by water, even on the beach there. That's not beach, that's river bottom right there. Talk about the concentration of fish as the water level shrinks. Is it more, is it plentiful, or is it less?
Well, a couple of things happen there. It's interesting, as water goes down in typically a lake, your fish become more concentrated, but when water falls, fish biologically react to it, and they typically don't like it because they have over many millennia have gotten to the point where they understand that falling water means that they may be on dry land, so they get really spooky. So they actually become a much more almost wary. Sometimes they'll stop eating. They change their habits, and so just because they're all together in one spot doesn't necessarily mean that they're going to eat. Once you get stability in a lake, then things start to change a little bit. The fish don't get freaked out. When it's dropping a foot a day, then you get fish that really go into what they call suspended mode, where they actually kind of don't eat and they just kind of hang around, and it's just one of their reactions to falling water.
It's fish nature.
It's fish nature. That's something. So if you see suspended fish and you have falling water, you may have a real tough time catching them.
Why do they concentrate in one area more so in the lower level water than say a lake that's full capacity?
Well, obviously they're in a situation where they're in a security situation, and fish are very security conscious because it's fish eat fish kind of a scenario. So if they have a hole by the side of a dam, and Wishon right now has a situation like that where there's actually a hole by the side of the dam where the fish are concentrating. So when you have that, those fish will obviously congregate there for two reasons. One is you've got cooler water typically that'll hold in that area, and you probably will have your coolest water of the lake by maybe a degree or so, but they'll find it. And the second thing is that they congregate and school up basically as a protection mechanism.
Right, but don't fish start eating other fish in those situations?
Absolutely, they'll predate themselves, and they have, but by the same token, they don't have much choice at that point. So when the water becomes really low, they will start to eat the smaller fish, and bass will eat bass, or trout will eat trout, whatever. Whatever they can get their mouth around.
Yeah, and so is that why it's easier to fish, and you're more liable to catch a larger number of fish during those kinds of conditions?
It's possible. What I would suggest is if you knew that the water became stable, it wasn't dropping rapidly, and stabilized for a couple of days, the fish might start to really go back into a feeding mode, and that might be a great time to really catch some good fish. And you have to be careful, and this is what I've actually written about with Fish and Game, is that these fish become more susceptible because now they're starting to feed. Now we have everybody and their dog that wants to go out and catch these fish, and they'll typically be catching fish and pulling out more fish than what they really should. So that lake can be affected for the next couple of years because of the amount of fish that are being taken out of there in a short time.
Right. So a hungry fish is a good fish to catch and easier to catch.
They're easier to catch, but once again, it's a matter of degree. So there's kind of that balance situation again here, where when we get down low, I really think Fish and Game needs to look at possibly having emergency measures where they actually either close a lake, change the limit, or make it a catch and release only. There's got to be some things here that we need to keep some of our stock alive, and the fish, if they do have enough water, that stock can explode biologically within a year or two.
Wow, that's amazing. So if I'm going fishing to Millerton or to Huntington, or where am I going to have better luck, Huntington or Miller?
Once again, we got two different species typically there. We don't really have any trout in Millerton, so that's a bass lake. It's a much more warmer water lake. It's lower elevation, so you get the more heat, whereas the upper lake. Right now, I would suggest going up into altitude. I would suggest that once again, that Shaver and Huntington would be by far your better bets to get up there, just because of the coolness of the water, and right now, just because I know the reports have been better anyhow.
So does the higher elevation and the coldness of the water, does that increase your chances of catching fish?
The fish are more active because as the water is cooler, like that within certain zones, there's more oxygen in the water, and they need oxygen. So and there's a biological kind of a formula that occurs there, that what happens is as water gets warmer, the oxygen content that it holds goes down.
Yeah.
Unfortunately for fish, it's just the opposite. As it becomes warmer, they need more oxygen. So if we have warming temperature, what happens is we have less oxygen, and these fish that are in warmer water need more oxygen. So we start to get to a crossover point where they literally can't get enough oxygen. So they will seek out cooler water holding more oxygen in order to make that happen, because their metabolism is running faster.
Oh, I see. All right. Talking to Roger George here about fishing, and you won't find anyone with more knowledge than Roger George here in the Central Valley about fishing. Got to read his column in the Fresno Bee each and every Wednesday, and you'll learn something new every time you read it. We're back with our program here on Connect with Me in just a moment.
Ventura TV Appliance Center. We're the save energy, save time, save money place. The Energy Star qualified #1 rated high-efficiency Cabrio from Whirlpool Place. You heard right. Right now, save big on select Whirlpool Cabrio laundry pairs and pay no interest when paid in full within 6 months. At the hometown low price, think outside the big box place. Since 1951, Ventura TV Appliance Center. We're working hard to be your place.
All right, back here on the program on Connect with Me with Roger George, and talking about fishing and the conditions, warm water, cold water. If you want to increase your chances of catching something, then maybe you should go up to the higher elevations, go up to Huntington, Florence, I don't know. It seems like a good theory to me, at least to try that and see what happens, and get back to us or get back to Roger George. You know, if you read his column in the Fresno Bee every Wednesday, you'll notice there's an email at the bottom. You want to ask some questions, email him, and then he will respond to you. But right now, I want to talk about monster fish. You know, we've all heard of the Loch Ness Monster. Okay, well, I don't know if that exists or not. Do you believe in that, by the way?
I'll tell you, there's some evidence that it's kind of hard to overcome, and you kind of go, maybe there's a prehistoric monster that lives in that lake.
I don't know.
So I'm kind of in a situation where I'm about 70-30, 70% not believing, 30% it is a possibility that there's something out there. But, that water is awful deep and dark, and you don't know what's down there. And that's the fun part. That's why there's so many monster fish programs on TV.
Yeah. Well, let me ask you this. Do you believe in ghosts?
Once again, we're back to the age 70-30 there. Yeah, exactly.
But do you believe in miracles?
Oh, absolutely. I believe in miracles, I'll tell you.
All right. Well, let's roll a videotape again from Millerton. I know you've seen it before. Probably 1,001 times. There's that mound that usually is covered by water. We played this earlier in the program.
That's Rattlesnake Island, by the way.
Yeah, I'm playing this again because I want to talk about the monster fish that you may think exist here at Millerton Lake. Do they really exist? That's my question, my friend.
Well, they really do exist in Millerton, and that's the...
How monster are they?
Well, how monster are they? They're probably bigger than most people would like to think. There are actually fish in Millerton that are probably over 400 pounds.
Wow.
And they may be approaching 12 foot long. But what
Wow.
they are is people, the old wives' tale that we hear all the time is that these catfish, these giant catfish, guys are diving by the dam, and across the United States, if you Google it, you'll find that there are literally thousands of these stories of divers going down, checking the dam, seeing giant catfish. Well, there is some truth to that, and there are sturgeon, and there are sturgeon that are gigantic, but not catfish don't get that big. They don't get 12 foot long. But in Millerton, there actually are sturgeon in Millerton. And the first certified catch of a sturgeon was about 7 years ago with a fish that probably was close to 100 pounds. And a guy caught it by accident, snagged it, brought it in. It was a baby compared to what they really can do.
Yeah.
And it's interesting because Fish and Game, as I talked to their top regional people, and they actually, when they were up netting fish for studies, actually had a gigantic sturgeon that they claim was close to 300 pounds that literally tore their nets up, and they weren't able to get it or weigh it, but from what they said, the size, that they said it was right in the 300-pound range.
Well, okay, the depth of Millerton is what, roughly speaking? Does anybody know?
Yeah, out in the dam area that leads up, the deepest part of the lake is the area leading right to the middle of the base of the dam. When the water is full, you're looking at close to 300 foot deep right now.
300 feet. So is that where these sturgeon are? Is that where they congregate? Is that where these monster fish hang out?
Typically, they will suspend. If they do, sometimes they will go up into that area, and they will suspend by a dam, and depends on the time of the year, whether they're spawning or whether they're not. And from what I understand, they spawn typically like in November, the later part of the year.
So they're there.
They're there, but they move from one end of the lake to the other, and they actually will go up into the river in the fall to try to spawn up there. And I've actually graphed a couple up there myself, and it's a situation where you almost don't believe what you're seeing. But there's just a few, and we know that there were a few put in there when the first fish were planted. The first stripers were planted in there. There was actually about 10 sturgeon that were also planted in there. So we know the fact that they were put in the lake, and we also know that they were in the San Joaquin River. So when it was dammed up, the likelihood of a couple of them being in the river where it was also there. So there's a few.
Explain why they're so hard to catch.
Well, those sturgeon are a different animal. If you do get a hold of one of them, you're probably going to have a heck of a time, because obviously your normal fish will probably be, in Millerton, might be 100 to 300 pounds. Well, most people are fishing for something that's a lot smaller, so if you did get a hold of it, you'd be like hanging onto a freight train.
Are you serious? Really?
Yeah, they're just...
They're going to fight you, huh?
They're going to fight you, and you're just not going to be able to move them. If you don't have the equipment to do it, you're probably on the losing end of a battle. And once again, most people are out fishing or hunting for elephants with BB guns. And that's just about
that's
what they're
the
doing.
Equivalent.
That's the equivalent. That's
Really?
the equivalent for those kind of fish. So
Now you said there are 400-pound monsters down there. Who has seen these 400-pound monsters?
Well, Fish and Game 12 years ago, and one of the regional directors, Dale Mitchell, is a good friend of mine, and we were talking about it, and he was telling me about one of their studies that they did, and they had one of these fish back 12 years ago that was in the net that I say that they got up and they saw it right up close and personal, and it was ripping the net apart as it was thriving.
That was a sturgeon, right?
That was a sturgeon. It was gigantic, and he said that they saw it and they estimated it over 300 pounds. That was a long time ago.
Right. So we know they're down there.
Yes.
And we know that they're hard to catch.
Yes.
Do you have people that go to Millerton to search for that type of fish?
No.
Do they have that kind of equipment to deal with it in case they do snag it?
There's been several people that I know that have actually, gotten sturgeon on and fought them for 2 or 3 hours, and didn't know what they really had. And they hooked them like on anchovies or some bait, and they're bottom feeders, and their mouth is on the bottom. They're prehistoric fish, so they will eat stuff like that. So when they hooked them, they thought they had a striper or a big catfish, and an hour later they realized that it was nothing of the sort. And the fish are they really almost didn't know they were hooked. They just kind of move around and keep going.
But you can't reel something that big in with a rod. I mean, you have to have a net, don't you? I mean, you explain it.
You better have the right equipment. You better have some big equipment.
Such as?
You would have to have at least probably 25, 30-pound test or more, and have a big rod and reel.
So you can reel one of those in?
You could, but a 300-pound fish, you might be fighting it for a couple of hours or more to get that thing in. So, your equipment could fail. Your equipment could fail. They catch sturgeon in Sacramento and the Sacramento River and a lot of areas of California, but you got to be prepared. Once again, it's going hunting for an elephant with an elephant gun rather than a BB gun.
Right.
So they're in there, but I don't know anybody that's really gone up there specifically to fish for sturgeon because there's so few. There's just a few of them, but they show up at times.
So few because?
There's only a few that were planted in there, and if they have reproduced, which it appears that they have reproduced a few, they don't reproduce big numbers. We have a few fish that are in there. So
and they're in deep water, right?
They will go from deep water into shallow water. They'll go wherever the food's at. Once again, we're talking fish that
bottom feeders.
The biological aspects of it. They may go up the river to try to spawn. That's their biology.
Yeah.
So it depends on the time of the year and what they're doing. And other times they may suspend out in deep water.
Yeah, I'll bet a lot of people that go fishing at Millerton, I'll bet they don't even know that. I'll bet they don't know that those sturgeon exist.
They don't. A lot of people, and there was an article, a little article in something called Weird Fresno this week about somebody saying they saw a 20-foot fish on top of the water, and it was 200 yards away, and I was laughing about it because I was kind of going, well, that's when one of the islands is coming up because the water is going down.
Right.
It looks like a fish out there, like the Loch Ness Monster. And I was just laughing because I was going, well, odds are 90-10 that it was an island,
right.
And they were saying it was a giant fish.
All right, back with our program here on Connect with Me. Roger George is our guest from the Fresno Bee, writes a column on Wednesdays in the sports section. Back here in just a moment.
When you like Ventura TV Appliance on Facebook, it's nice. But when you love the Frigidaire Gallery appliances we deliver, it's even better. Our website is cool, and it's a good place to start, but you really should touch the merchandise before you buy. Time for that upgrade to an Energy Star qualified French door Frigidaire Gallery refrigerator. Quality appliances for the way you live. Get the best selection, price, and service in town without waiting. Come in to Ventura TV Appliance and touch the merchandise.
Hey, we're back here with Roger George on Connect with Me. I was just saying it's in that Bruce Jenner video. It's a good thing you knew that Russian athlete because I had no idea.
Well, I had to compete against him, so I knew him pretty well.
Pretty amazing stuff here. So, well, we have a phone call. Let's take it. Good morning. You're on Connect with Me. Your question for Roger George.
Well, I think you're right. I think you hit the nail on the head when you said that Roger has probably the best and most balanced opinion regarding water for men, water for fish, wildlife, and for maintaining the balance, delicate balance of nature in our community, in the Central Valley area. My question is, Roger, do you think that the project, you're talking about Temperance Flat, do you think that it should be scaled up to make it more cost-effective, to hold more water, increase storage? And if so, do you think that the utilities could be involved in this, or even to get into water politics a little bit, could water rights be sold to help finance this and don't put the whole burden on public and public funds and federal funds? I guess that's my question. There you go.
Okay.
Well, to answer that, my first thought is that as far as managing the water, how much water that it's going to hold, if it could hold more, then yeah, if it could hold a heck of a lot more, maybe I would feel differently. And if they're telling me that every year that it would be filled up. But at this point, what I'm looking at more is I'm looking more at what other projects would be more effective. And in looking at the numbers that I've seen, it appears that some of the dam raisings and some of the other areas would be actually dollar for dollar more effective. So just kind of on that basis, I'd have to say that I still see those projects as being a higher priority than I would going after a project that's going to take years and $1 billion to give us a limited amount of water in a certain limited numbers of years out of this watershed. And I may be wrong, but that's been what I picked up.
Hey, in your article today, June 11th, 2014, you say dried up mud holes lined with carcasses of dead and dying fish make me sick. How much in terms of fish are we losing?
I talked to somebody the other day that was telling me there's a major, one of the biggest ponds in the foothills that's been around for 40, 50 years, that it is literally dried up, and that right now there were thousands of bass that were floating that were in the 5 to 7 pound range, and they had actually caught 3 bass over 14 pounds out of that pond in the last couple of years. Those are huge numbers. Those are gigantic fish. That's just one pond. So if you can imagine, a lot of these ponds have been something that are heritages that people that own the property have managed for years. So we're not only losing the heritage that they had, those ponds, we're losing a whole generation of fish that are very large that should be there.
Because, like you say in your article today, it takes decades to replenish that,
yes,
right, with the fish.
Yes, the warm water fishery, the Department of Fish and Wildlife has a very good and very large cold water project for cold water fish like trout and salmon. But
salmon especially.
Yes, salmon especially. But when it comes to warm water fish, which are your bass, stripers, catfish, crappie, bluegill, there really is no real process going on there, and if they are, they're very minimal.
Yeah, I read an article in the Bee probably maybe a month or two, probably a couple of months now, where they're actually taking salmon out and transporting them up to Merced because they want to try to put them in these cold water fisheries.
Right.
Salmon cannot survive in warm water.
No, and you know, and that's one of the controversies about the San Joaquin River Restoration Project, is just that they can manage the water well enough that it will be cold enough for the time that those fish are moving up and down the river system. So, and that's one of the big questions, is can it be maintained? So that's still a question that is got to be answered really at a level we haven't got to yet.
Give me a couple of tips here, because I've taken my son fishing maybe once or twice. All right, what's the key to catching a 50-pounder? And let's put up some of those other photos too, by the way, before we run out of time. That's your, is that your 30-pounder right there?
That's a 30-pounder that I got, this year out of San Luis Reservoir. I fish over there and guide over there.
Wow, wow, that's pretty good. And there you are on Snipper, Fish Snipper. That's the magazine on the front cover. What year was that?
That was just, that was actually like November of 2013 here, and I took the editor out fishing, and we caught nothing for about 4 hours, and fishing was terrible, and I said, let's go check out a place, and we got into some
So
incredible
what do you
fish.
do when, you take your son out there and nothing happens? You don't even get a bite, not even a nibble.
Well, I'll tell you what.
What's the key?
The key is at that point is go home. No.
Yeah, thanks, Roger.
You know, for a lot of people, once again, you're looking at what species you're talking about, and when you're fishing for these big fish like I'm fishing for here, one of the big issues is stealth and timing.
Yeah, but we weren't fishing for big fish like you. We were
Right.
just in some pond or something, and we just were fishing for small fish,
Right.
but we couldn't get a nibble. So what kind of bait do you use?
Well, if you're fishing, it depends on what kind of fish you're fishing for. That's the thing. It's so specific.
You use worms? Is that the most common?
I'll tell you what. I'm going to give you a tip.
That's what I was asking
I'm going
for.
to give you a tip here. If they dropped me by parachute into some place in the world, and they can only give me one bait to fish with,
It would be
a worm. That
Why?
literally, because it works almost for everything. In spite of everything that we've been told, if you had to live on it, and if that was the one key thing that you had to use to survive, I would take a night crawler over anything.
I bet it doesn't work on humans, though.
You might put them in your mouth to keep them warm if it's cold.
So a worm works every time.
Well, I'll tell you what, they work a lot of the time, and when all else fails, sometimes they will. The number one bait, if I had to rate something.
Yeah, because you can go into a bait shop and they can sell you all kinds of weird things that I don't even know about.
Pile worms and all kinds of things.
Whatever. Just
Right.
the old, the worms that you find in your backyard in the dirt. Those work the best, right?
Those are probably one of the very best, and I've dug a lot of worms in my day. I have.
Roger, George, it was a pleasure having you on the show today. Good luck to you, and we'll see you again. Hey, come back on our show.
I'm ready to go when you are.
Okay, Roger George, fisherman, and a lifetime fisherman almost, and a writer for the Fresno Beat, back with another edition of Connect with Me tomorrow here on Comcast, channel 187 and 43.6.
You ready, Bo?
Let's go.
Dr. Shields, activated, Mr. Sullivan.
Automatic, sir.
And we're pushing to the leaning.
Situation critical.
Base of action.
Can't break loose.
Peace or utter destruction. It's up to you.
Star Trek, Saturdays at 9, 8 Central on MeTV. Brought to you by Ventura TV.
Nothing could be finer than to be in Carolina in the morning. Nothing could be finer than to be in Carolina in the